What?
How come this is all news to everybody? I'll tell you why. It's because we've got an entire Leviathan out there to make sure you never find out any of this. Actually, what we're talking about here is actually quite high-end. It's quite esoteric. They don't even want you to get to that stage before they bring on the jugglers. And they've got every kind of distraction, every kind of placebo, every kind of bromide, you see, to make sure that this, even the questioning function, does not arise in your mind. And don't the scientists or biologists know that the overstimulated mind, because they study children now and they watch this, just the fact that you're overstimulated by the garbage they produce freezes your brain. We're talking about an investigation, moving from an alpha and omega, what we would call thinking. Thinking's on its way out, folks. That's too much trouble. You can't think. They've so inundated your mind in exactly the same way that Schopenhauer and so many people explain, that you're incapable of real thought, let alone realizing the metaphysical fact that actually the very act of thinking is for self-discovery. That's not even, that's too far. But here we are breaking the consensus. There are people who will stand out, who will learn to say no, right? Another way to explain the age of revealing is to say that it's the spirit of rebellion that is abroad in the world. And people who really know my work will know that I even connect that to the Christian idea of the Holy Spirit. That to me, this concept of the spirit of rebellion is, in fact, is very, very similar to what the Christians refer to and regard as the Holy Spirit. Jack Trout said, though, in his book of Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind, he said the same person constantly analyzes the world of reality and then changes what's inside his or her head to fit the facts. That's an awful lot of trouble for most people. Besides, how many people want to constantly change their opinions to fit the facts? It's a whole lot easier to change the facts to fit your opinions. Unsane people, it's a very important word. It's different than insane. Unsane people make up their minds and they find the facts to verify their opinions. Or even more commonly, they accept the opinion of the nearest expert. And we in the research community are here to drum it into your mind. You are the expert. There is nobody expert. And if you put somebody on a pedestal, expect a kick in the teeth eventually. It's as simple as that. And then they don't have to bother about the facts at all. I think that sums it up. But one of the other reasons why we don't know this is that there is a highly funded, actively existing campaign, open and hidden campaign of prohibition and suppression. Avram Manhattan, an expert on Vatican intrigue, wrote, I think in the 1960s, pagan temples were either closed, transformed into Christian shrines, or demolished. Their properties were summarily added to the church's patrimony. The wealth of sundry religions were mercilessly expropriated. Their clergy dismissed or persecuted when not civilly or even physically obliterated. Helen Ellery, in her book, the fine book, The Dark Side of Christian History, says that after Christians have spent years destroying books and libraries, St. John Chrysostom, the preeminent Greek father of the church, proudly declared every trace of the old philosophy and literature of the ancient world has vanished from the face of the earth. Proudly. Burning libraries, cutting up priestesses, right? Murdering, killing. Active suppression. It's not by accident that the ignorance factor exists in the world and that the consensus is believed. We have a Leviathan actively and open. I don't want that to generate fear or paranoia in anybody. It is a simple statement of the fact. There is a tiger hiding in the long grass. But a match, the hunter knows that you light one match and the camouflage is gone. And suddenly that skulking, vile creature is exposed. But this, never forget, in my work I try to stress this so much, it's very important to study all these different permutations, of course, in the political world, in the economic world, in the religious world, but let us never ever forget that ultimately the war is a psychic one. It is a war on consciousness. That needs never to be forgotten, even though it takes many forms. We spoke a little earlier about these, the Orwellian doublespeak and how right it is. And I just want to give you one example. We're going to be talking a little bit later on about the Aryan. But let me just use it as an example now, as an example of this Orwellian doublespeak. There's all the difference in the world between an Aryan migration and an Aryan invasion. Right? You take one word and you twist it round, and suddenly let's just talk even about the north of India, where it's accepted that there was something called an Aryan invasion, right? But then they dig up the evidence and find that all these people on the Saraswati and Sindh River were living happily side by side. That there was in fact Northwesterners who lived in India. And they are known in Indian culture. Don't believe all the latest propaganda. It is accepted and understood that such people existed. But the British Israelite coterie and the rest of the propagandists did this. They just take the word, think about it, they take the word in migration, which implies something completely different. And you just put the word invasion in there, and then you've got evil Aryans butchering everybody. Those evil invaders, you see how it's done? And there's so many other examples of this. Tacitus said, if you want to rule the whole world, does it follow that everyone else welcomes enslavement? To robbery, slaughter, plunder, they give the lying name freedom. They make a wilderness and call it peace. This is this process, which has so many permutations. But we move on now and look at this concept of Atlantis. Again, a little overview of what we know about it. It's mentioned in every culture under different names. And it's been accepted now that it's probably geologically impossible for an island to actually sink under the waters like we've traditionally understood. They're not writing it off completely, but it's more like that if Atlantis did in fact exist in the Atlantic Ocean area, that maybe some of the land masses are part of Atlantis. So there's all these certain, theories. But the names are also fascinating and interesting to look into. Professor Tolkien, people are familiar with his work, he referred to it as Numenor. But anyone can see that he was referring to the pre-Diluvian civilizations of Lemuria and Atlantis. The story of Lemuria is very old, right? All the way back in the most earliest of the Irish legends, the Gaelic legends or the legends, you have the 4 sacred islands from which they came. Because they're saying that first there was a great cataclysm, a deluge, and then the ancestors of the Gaels, the ancestors of the Irish, the great godlike people, came to Ireland, but they say they came from 4. They don't just say one island like Atlantis, like we traditionally understand. They spoke of at least 4 different islands. Phalius, Murias, Phineas, and Gorias, to be precise. And one of those words is very interesting, is it not? Murias. Murias, just like the French today have the L serving as an English the, right? Like the word Lazarus. The word L was often used just as a the, in exactly the same way as used today in French. So, taking that further, what happens if the L was the Murias? Lemuria, right? Is the Gaelic Murias. The etymology shows you something intriguing there. But it's the Irish talking about it. That's the main thing to understand. Now we move to Ireland itself. Edward Spencer, a writer, British government official in Ireland, he said that the Irish are one of the most ancient nations that I know of at this end of the world, and are from as mighty a race as the world ever brought forth. Edmund Curtis, in 1922, said that the traditions of the Irish people are the oldest of any race in Europe, north and west of the Alps, and they themselves are the longest settled on their own soil. Peter Beresford, he said in his book The Druids, the Irish system is the oldest surviving complete codified legal system in Europe, with its roots in ancient Indo-European custom and not in Roman law, and is therefore the oldest surviving Celtic system of jurisprudence. Daniel Pinchback says that historians and archaeologists have biased us to think of prehistoric or pre-modern cultures as societies of scarcity. This was certainly not the case in ancient Britain, as they had the time as well as the determination to plan and build their enormous outdoor temples, constructed from 5,000 to 10,000 stone circles over a 1,000-year period. The word Ireland comes from Ari land, or Arya land. Yeah, the I-R-E is a translation, meaning land of the Arya or the Aryans. In Indo-European language, it was Alyan, meaning the Lord, the land of the lords or the land of the gods. The letter A was transposed, of course, to E. They're interchangeable. And so we have Eri or Era. Egyptian symbolism proliferates. And the traditional explanation, when you see the red hand of Ulster, or you see the David's harp, you know, in Ireland and various other Nordic symbols, when you see bizarre symbols like this in the West, the traditional answer is, no, well, that's explainable. It's the holy, holy people. It's old Jeremiah there and his gang, the same Israelites. But wait a minute. Is there a story where they got those symbols? Was it really an East to West movement? Or was it something else? And then, very key to my work is the origin of these world's premier secret societies. In fact, I try to address that in so many different talks, you know. Not so much about the secret societies themselves, but who's at the top of these hierarchies, because that's what they are. They're hierarchies in exactly the same way that a school or fraternity or college has a hierarchy, and at the top is sitting some ponce, who we call a headmaster. It goes the same way for the churches and for these orders. The Templars and their connection to Ireland, another fascinating a tremendous connection. Templars is associated with Scotland, of course, of France we know. But you know, we go further there and look at the Chaldean church. The church of the Chaldees that has sort of fallen by the wayside, not too many people addressing it. The Cistercian order, you know, has come to light through the work of various authors. And the origin of these royal families. When you're talking Tudor and you're talking Plantagenet, you know, when you're talking even Windsor, or Saxe-Coburg, or Hanover, or Habsburg, what's the underlying connection here? Sure, they have dynastic rivals. Sure, they like nothing better than to get up in the morning, ride out on a horse and club each other over the head. You know, our history books are full of this dynastic rivalry. But don't let for a moment think that they're not intimately connected also. Right? Psychopaths like pillow fights, and they don't mind how many people die in the process, especially if it's you. The champagne is cold, sit on the hill, watch them massacre themselves, and there's one for the history books. Right? But who? So we understand that there's been dynastic rivalries and tremendous wars and fighting. But we also need to continue to focus on the fact that there's intimate connections like this. My friend, and of course Ralph will know also, our good friend in Ireland, Andy Power, who studied the so-called Battle of the Boyne. Only problem is you can scratch the word battle because he couldn't find evidence of any battle. But you found plenty of evidence of astrotheology. Found plenty of evidence to find out that when the King Billy's horse moves into the river, something's happening up there with the heavenly rivers. Oh yeah, couldn't find a belt buckle or a button. Couldn't find evidence of any corpses or bones or anything like that. But you could find plenty of evidence of something else. Symbolism. That the handing over of the dynastic, you know, symbols and the dynastic power from one gang of criminals to another. And that this entire rite is performed in Irish soil, a heartbeat away from some of the most ancient monuments of the ancestors, namely Newgrange and Tara. What's that all about? And is it going on today? It's not just something of the 1690. This is happening in front of your eyes. But of course, where are we really? What happens when you call something the alternative, you know, research community or conspiracy or whatever? You're talking about addressing the fallacies we've been told. Isn't that what it basically is founded on? Is somebody coming along and saying, I don't think this is right. I don't agree. There's contradictions here. Well, you know, you went to school with 36 classmates. Only you have asked that question. The rest of them couldn't care less. They're getting on with what they think is called life, which is really only lifestyle. So the few have gone, no, it doesn't make sense. And then science, you know, finding new discoveries, finding land bridges, and etc. And so you start to put it together that we've been sold, you know, a pack of lies. But are, like Nietzsche said, your truths merely your irrefutable errors? Is that as far as humanity has got? Well, yes, unfortunately it is where humanity has got, because see, truth doesn't need any monitoring. Truth does not require any spring cleaning. It doesn't require you to drive up and get a car wash. It doesn't need to have a tune-up. Only lies need that. Truth is absolutely everlasting and completely sustainable. It doesn't need to be revamped, remodeled, rethought out. That's only happening, you know, down through the centuries with a lie mechanism that constantly needs revamping and constantly needs updating and constantly needs reinstalling into your mind. My work is very much dedicated to a man I hope you all know about, Conor McDowry, and addresses like he did the falsehoods that we've accepted as facts. It addresses who the creators of these falsehoods were and are, and the reasons why human beings are not told the truth about their origins and about their religions. What are we doing here? Picking up the slack on our own time. Well, wait a minute. Didn't we go through 18 years of school? Didn't we sit under bloody fluorescent lights like regimented morons for 16, 18 years? Do this, do that. We teach you how to jump through bloody hoops, but they suddenly forgot to tell you about the most important things in your life. That's a crime. That's absolutely that we in our own time later on, you know, as we're already trying to raise families and work and have a life, no, now we're back picking up the slack of the stuff we know we were not taught. This is abominable. And we need to make sure that the future generation maybe can be spared some of that nonsense. Because they're going to go through it too. What was all that education? Or as my mentor Jordan Maxwell said, is it nothing more than gradual indoctrination, graduation? So McDowry said something magnificent about this. He addressed this. He said, the generally accepted history of ancient times, such as is found on the shelves of our libraries and taught in our schools, is mostly fiction. Very entertaining though, I'll give them that. Made up of fables and myths cleverly composed into history so nicely as to lull all suspicion in the mind of the reader or student as to the fraudulent character of it. Well, it's a wonderful cartoon, you know, isn't it? As long as it's entertaining, you're not going to ask too many questions. But some wonderfully clever writers have been led astray by these deceptions of history. And then we have what we refer to as the historical amnesia, which is, as I said, in most of the other classmates that you went to school with, and in the world in general. As the great ancient priests said to Solon, the father of Plato, in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. At Plato's time, they're already being critiqued about having historical amnesia. That's right. And what are some of these fallacies? We list a few in the book. I really feel it's important to go over them so that we're really clued in to the fact that when we're looking at the truth and we're doing this work, which I consider very holy work in a way, that we are addressing fallacies that are now on their way out, ladies and gentlemen. These are being addressed. Fallacy number one. There was no advanced pre-Diluvian civilizations. Pyramid building, basket weaving, mathematical systems. I thought this all popped out of the blue. That was lucky. That was chance. Like hell it was. Primitive man was rude and malevolent. Haven't you heard that one? Bone chucking, freezing, skin wearing. Right? That's your ancestors are telling you about, and there's a reason why they address your ancestors in such a way. 3. The megalithic ruins throughout the world were constructed by unrelated races. And that's another chance as well. So you can go to Brittany, you can go to Spain, you can go out to Nigeria. Ever been to Nigeria and seen the ruins there that look exactly like the Celtic, you know? What about the famous ones in Zimbabwe? What about all those beautiful pyramids over there in South America? All unrelated. That was accident. You've even got scientific theories telling you it all happened independently. And it holds true for a certain amount of it, but it certainly doesn't hold true for etymology. It does not hold true for many of the precise customs that are absolutely duplicated. Hopefully we can get to one regarding the serpent symbolism later on. Absolutely the same. The symbolism shows you that it's nonsense what they're telling you there. They tell us that the ambassadors of civilizations was the Greeks, Romans, and the Jews. Don't even get me started on that one. Let's quickly move on, right? The elements of civilization, as we said already, were brought by a chosen people. And always, the key thing, from the east to the west. As time goes by, hopefully that one will be re-explored, you see. And then we hear that Jews, given that we even know what that term relates to, which is a tremendous study, Jews were uniquely distinguished. They possessed a naturally religious and moral disposition. And they were truly God-inspired chosen people. Not you, they. The Jews were the first monotheists. That's another fallacy. The Jews were poor slaves in Egypt and hard-pressed to preserve their unique identity and beliefs. A man that's sitting 5 yards away from me has proven, no, they were pharaohs, they were kings, they were nobles in the land of Egypt. Where did that story come from then? The Bible provides an accurate account of historical occurrences. It's never mythology. And why didn't they just tell us it was? In fact, the writers of the Bible knew it was mythology. They were never under any doubt. Because as we know, if they really wanted it to be autobiography, they probably would have done a better job. No, they knew, but we're not